important.
Well, thank you. You know, a lot of it was because of you. You were like, come on, let's do this thing. We got things to talk about. And I was like, all right, we're getting a knock at the door. We got to answer the door, you know?
Yep.
So I'm glad we're doing this too. Thank you for that. Very much so. Okay, so here we go. We're gonna go like this. We're gonna grab this. I'm gonna mute that. That's good. Okay, I just gotta paste this and save that. Done. Publish. And let's see if that's working. Oh yeah, it looks good. Looks good. All right, dear sir, let's go. All right, everybody, welcome to season 2 of NDs for Truth live discussions. I'm Dr. Moshe Daniel Block. This is our first episode back. As you may have heard the preamble chit chat, Dr. Lebowski had contacted me. I was down for a while, moving to another country, setting up a farm, homestead, electroculture farm, which we're going to talk about after. And, you know, it was time to get going. I have here Dr. Lebowski for our second time. This is going to be season 2. We hope to go deeper than any ND has ever gone before, and share lots of good pertinent topics, which we are going to discuss today for your edification, for your, you know, for empowering yourself to heal, to know yourself better, whatever that may be for. So I have Dr. Lebowski here. Now, Dr. Lebowski is a homeopath, a chiropractor, and a naturopath who practices in Ashland, Oregon. His primary clinical interest is the unraveling of chronic multi-system degenerative disease. He is currently working on his first book. Is this your first book? This is the one that you're working on.
Yeah.
He has published his first book, titled The Virus and the Host, which discusses the backdrop around viruses, infections, and why some people get sick and others don't. He sees that immunology and medicine are due for a major overhaul and believes that by applying naturopathic principles, he will be on the planet long enough to see that happen. Good for you. I agree. Homeopathy, naturopathic principles, and I'll like dabble in a little bit of alchemy to help me with that as well, which maybe we could talk about it sometime. So welcome back, Dr. Lebowski. Welcome back.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. It always is. And I was very impressed receiving your book. You know, I find it very professional looking. The subject matter is right on the cutting edge of importance right now. What inspired you to bring this to the world?
It was really being in the throes of COVID, you know, treating so many people, seeing so many people come in the door and feeling as if the naturopathic profession didn't really have a voice. You know, we were watching sort of the mainstream allopathic mainline narrative, and I wasn't really seeing anyone in the naturopathic profession speaking up in the way that I felt was the truth of what I was seeing every day clinically, you know? So I felt that somebody had to write it, somebody had to say it. And so I just got typing. I got up every morning and I wrote, you know, I got up at 5 a.m. every single morning and I wrote. And then I'd go for a run, and then I'd come back and I'd drink coffee, and then I'd go to work and I'd see more patients and I'd see more COVID patients. And then every morning I'd get up and write. And so I just, you know, I pounded it out. I found a great publisher, Chelsea Green. They do a lot of really great health books. They're out of Vermont, and they were inspired by it. They felt it was an important message. So that's really what I needed it to get in print. And I need it for posterity. I need it for people to be able to look back in the future and say, oh, here was this perspective about COVID and viruses in general.
Yeah, naturopathic doctors weren't completely silent on the matter.
Yeah.
I think we talked a little bit last year about why naturopaths were silent.
We did.
which we maybe will naturally get into again. But for now, this is really excellent. So you really busted it out in a kind of an expedient way to make it current for the time. Like you didn't take your time writing a book for 10 years. You really got it out quick.
It took a while. I mean, writing a book is a Herculean task for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of editing. I wish it had come out 6 months ago. I wish it had come out a year ago, but it just took as long as it did. But I feel that it's pertinent now. And because it's, it's not just about COVID, it's about viruses and health. And it's instilled with lots of deep naturopathic practices. I think it's a book that's always going to be valid, or at least that's my hope. Somebody could pick it up 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and there's still very valuable information there.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Like in the beginning of the book, you make a lot of points about viruses. That's what you're talking about. And you devote a lot of time and know-how to that. Can you share a few points, like a few of your favorite things to talk about with the audience?
Sure. Well, and this does go back. I mean, this goes back over the last 15 years of practice, that there was always something for me about viruses. Like there was just something from the conventional standpoint and even the naturopathic standpoint that just didn't make sense. You'd hear about other doctors and the way they treated viruses or the therapies for viruses. And I would do all those things, like I'd treat people that came in with type 2 herpes. I would treat kids that came in with chickenpox. I would treat people that came in with influenza. And the viruses always acted different than the bacterial, the fungal, the protozoal, and the parasitic infections. There was something about it that just didn't sit right with me. And, for example, I can't tell you, I know you've seen this. I got a gazillion people in the practice where they're married or they're lovers or they're a couple, and one of them gets herpes and the other one doesn't.
Yeah.
And they make love and they sleep together and they eat together and they do everything together. And this person gets herpetic eruptions around their genitals and this person never does. And that always got to me. I was like, what is going on with this? So part of the book really started 15 years ago, and my deep dive in trying to understand viruses. Viruses in and of themselves are very different than the other pathogens, right? They don't eat, they don't respire, they are non-motile, they don't care whether they're in water or not in water. They need some other cell to reproduce. So they're very unusual. They're very strange. And I make the point in the book that I think of them much more like a piece of information or a piece of code than I think about them as an organism. And I think that's important for us moving forward as we sort of think about the way viruses work and what they are. We should have a deep understanding of them. But then there's this other piece that really, I noticed it over the years, and it became very, very clear to me throughout SARS-CoV-2, that viruses have a relationship with toxicity. There is something about viruses and toxicity. And I don't claim to have figured it out completely, but I feel as if in the book I start to lay this question out for people to start to think about. Because what I have seen over and over and over again, not only in chronic viruses, but in SARS-CoV-2, that the people who had a body burden of toxins are the ones that get sick to a much greater degree. And back to my previous point, go back to the example of the couple where you have the one person who never, presents with herpes and the other one that does over and over again. And I would give this person licorice and I would give this person lemon balm and I would do all these things, naturopathic things, and yet they would still get these herpetic eruptions. When I started detoxifying them, when I started cleaning this person out of the heavy metals and the molds and the plastics and the glyphosate and all the other junk, they stopped having herpetic eruptions. And
Amazing.
that was the thing that always got to me.
Okay, so that's what troubled you, and you kind of put your finger on it. Now that does sound similar to what the likes of Dr. Thomas Cowan and Dr. Andrew Kaufman are talking about. Now, I wanted to talk to you about this. I thought we were going to do it a bit later, but it seems appropriate now. In that what their claim is, and I don't support this claim, but it's similar. So I'd like you to tease this out for us.
Yeah.
That there's no such thing as viruses. That what we're seeing is actually an exosome exiting the cell, which is a form of toxicity being expressed by the cell, a detoxification of the cell. And under an electron microscope, the two are identical. So what they're concluding is that therefore there is no such thing as a virus. What we call viruses is simply just the body detoxifying from toxicity. What do you think about that? What do you have to say about that?
Sure. And I've, listened to many hours of Thomas Cowan. He and I share the same publisher and editor. I've listened to many hours of Andy Kaufman. I haven't had the opportunity to speak with either one of them yet, though I really look forward to that at some point in the future. At the bottom line, I think that they, like me, are onto something, but have not completely codified it or completely understand it.
Yeah.
And because there's this piece there about toxins and viruses, and anybody that treats viruses and pays attention will see this thing. But to say there's no such thing as a virus, you and I have had countless experiences as physicians, right? Where we've seen people who were in close proximity with someone else and they contracted a virus.
Yes.
Thousands of times.
Even in my personal life, in my family, kids that have, rubella, and then the next kid gets it being exposed to that.
Yep.
You
have to explain that. And I've heard some of them explain that the phenomenon is perhaps it's something energetic that transpires between one person and another, that in a way it's a signal. There might be some truth to that, but I think at a minimum, why say there's no virus until you can better name the phenomenon?
Yeah.
Why take away the best possible explanation if you can't actually point to what it is?
Right. I agree. And I think that what we can observe, because I think that we underestimate, or we perhaps don't give it enough credit, what we can actually observe with our own senses. There's a lot that we can observe with our own senses. We kind of have given away to science and fancy testing and stuff like that. That will answer everything. But we can see with our own eyes that someone is sick, they go to a party and other people get sick. Not everybody. So there's a phenomenon there, which we can understand. There's a phenomenon there, but that we can see. And not only do they get sick in the same fashion. So let's say let's humor that idea that my body's sending your body a signal. Hey, I'm detoxifying of this toxin, which is in our environment we share. And therefore you can do it too. And you can do it in the same fashion with the same kind of symptoms that I'm doing it. Why don't we just call that? We could call it infectiousness, but I would like to take away the fear around that, or the idea that this is a bad thing. We have to sterilize our environment and be afraid of virulence. But certainly there is something being conveyed between people. In the past, we called that virulence, infection. So I can't say I know for sure what's going on, but I do see the correlation between someone with expressing a virus and somebody getting that same presentation. By same, I mean similar. Not, we all express viruses in different fashions, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree completely. There's some phenomenon there. We don't understand it completely. But why throw the baby out with the bathwater, in my opinion, until we do, But I do think we should investigate this, how people present with viruses, what toxins they are dumping when they get a virus, and that's where we should investigate. And how does that signal potentially work? Is it really a respiratory droplet that then enters our nasopharynx and then populates? Or is it some other layer of energetic expression in combination with that? And I think that's the most interesting stuff to pay attention to.
Absolutely. You know, in homeopathy, we accept the presence of miasms, which, you know, we won't necessarily get into the theory of miasms, but miasms can be conveyed, and homeopaths and naturopathic doctors have observed them being conveyed. For example, the rabies miasm, which happens to be a virus as well, through not actual contact, but the energy behind a rabid dog, its violence, its rage can convey to a person energetically and imprint on them that miasm so that they start to exhibit aspects of the rabies miasm without contact. So there are interesting phenomena that I think as we broaden and open our minds to the possibilities, we'll be able to discover a lot more rather than staying, you know, really myopically to like with these blinders of having to stick to this sort of rigid dogma of what we consider science.
Yeah, I speak to that in the book too. Because I think a great example of that is germ versus terrain theory.
Yeah.
People feel they have to be in one camp or the other. It's either about the germ or it's about the terrain. And I say, no, it's honestly about both. It really is about both. And I call it the biological equilibrium theory, because there are particular pathogens that are so virulent that the greater majority of people are going to present with symptoms, whether their terrain is healthy or not.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are plenty of pathogens where if your terrain's really healthy, you won't have any sense that you've ever been exposed to a pathogen, whether it's a protozoa or a fungus or a bacteria or a virus. So
yeah,
I think I agree completely that entrenchment in ideas, it's time that we start really opening our minds to looking to the other possibilities of how the human organism interacts with disease.
absolutely. And I see in your book, you mentioned that our own DNA is made up of a lot of viral DNA, we could say.
Quite a bit.
And, you know, one thing I've observed is the phenomenon of children getting sick and they have a flu, some kind of, let's call it, let's stick to the virus for now. And then afterwards, they have a mental leap. They're exhibiting new behaviors. They're more mature. Their language has developed more. They're looking older. What's going on there? That's something very interesting to observe.
Oh, it's fascinating. Perhaps they got an upgrade. Perhaps they picked up some information that then turned on some epigenetic triggers to stimulate growth in all these different areas. You've had that too. You've been sick before with a virus. And then when you were done, you went, I feel great, man. I feel really good. I feel better than I did before.
Mm-hmm.
I feel stronger. My brain's working better. Some system in my body's working better. Right. They're a signal. They're a trigger for something to happen in our system.
And that might be detoxification, like you said, so that the body's, you're getting run down, you're stressed, you're holding, like when we're stressed, we have a lower vibration in our subtle energy body, right? That attracts perhaps toxins, or perhaps it also weakens us from detoxifying naturally in a better fashion. So then the virus kicks in as a facilitator of what needs to be accomplished to bring us into equilibrium. It's in our favor. It's not something to be afraid of. And when there is the potential for death, I understand by a virus, let's say, I understand caution with those people in our society that are susceptible. There are some people that are susceptible to infection such that they might die because they're very weak and they're immunocompromised and they have multiple comorbidities. So I get that. But to be afraid of infection is just not understanding it properly, just not seeing it properly.
I agree 100%. Yeah, I think we have to reframe the way we think about it.
Absolutely. So going back to Andy Kaufman, Dr. Kaufman, one of the things I saw him speaking with Dr. Judy Mikovits. Mm-hmm. Judy Mikovits. So of course, I've always found her to be have a sincerity in her voice. And I listen to people's voices. You could hear the quality of somebody's, expression through their voice. And I have always found her to be authentic and honest as far as she knows. That's what she's doing, right? So the reason why I bring this up is, Andy Kaufman was kind of badgering her with the same question over and over and over again, which she really couldn't answer well. But it's almost like he was a one-trick pony, if I might say, in that moment, where he just kept saying, but have we isolated the virus? Have we isolated the virus? And her answers were intelligent, but she wasn't really addressing that very question. And she was trying to, but he just kept going on like a dog with a bone. He wouldn't come off of this point. He kept hammering at her. Now, I think that he has a good point there, that they haven't isolated the virus. And we know from past SARS and MERS and stuff like that, that they haven't come up with effective vaccines, right, to protect. So how did they come up with a vaccine so quickly when they struggled to come up with a vaccine for even these old infections like HIV or anything that have been around for decades, right? So I get that they didn't isolate it. That's fine. But because they didn't isolate it, does that automatically conclude that there's no such thing as a virus, or there's no such thing as SARS-CoV-2?
I mean, there are plenty of stars and planets in the galaxy that we are aware of their presence because of gravitational pull or their effect on another planet. We can see things tangentially, and yet we haven't seen them ourselves. Does that mean they don't exist? Right. So that's always bothered me too. Just because maybe we haven't purified the protein and we can, pick it up in a dropper. I agree. I don't think that means that it doesn't exist.
No,
there's a phenomenon. There's a phenomenon with SARS-CoV-2. I can tell you, I sat across near 1,000 people, or whether in person or afterwards or on Zoom or on the phone, who had this phenomenon. I had the phenomenon myself. My family had the phenomenon. There's something there.
Yeah, there is for sure. There is for sure. And so I just wonder why he's so on this point, because I'm with him. Like, I'm in the camp. I don't know what the heck's in this vaccine. I don't know what they put in there, right? Because if they didn't isolate the virus, then it's a really dirty conglomeration of whatever tissues they're getting some infected person's virus from, or it's not SARS-CoV-2 at all. Either way, it's not a clean vaccine. And as we have now seen after a couple of years, it's not an effective vaccine, right? It's not effective. So I get that. But to say that it doesn't exist just because we didn't isolate it, that's a little bit of I don't know, bait and switch, or a little bit of a unfair argument, I would say. And I say that also in defense of Dr. Mikovits, because I think that she was really put on the spot and she didn't know how to respond in that moment. So,
yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, I guess somebody has to say it. I think all sides of the equation should be discussed. Back to the former point, though, if you can't explain the phenomenon, then use the best possible answer at the time.
Yeah, sure. That's good. I like that. I like that. Now, there is the question of, okay, so let's say we look back at this example of children evolving faster or more, or our own experiences after we got sick, we're feeling better, we've had a leap in some way. I can understand that with viruses that evolve naturally, that mutate naturally through natural processes, through the collective consciousness of Gaia, Mother Earth. I can get that. What I don't know is the complicated sphere of biologically altered viruses. Is that what we're dealing with? It would seem so. When we see the gain of function research going on in Wuhan, which the so-and-so organizations have supported, it does seem like this came from a lab. That's even their narrative. The narrative of the mainstream is that it was released from a lab by mistake or something. So when there's a natural process, there's one thing, but what about with an unnatural process? What do you think about that? What does that change in the game?
I think the short answer is we have no idea. And I don't, I say it a lot. I don't think we'll know the repercussions of this for a generation or two. We really aren't going to know what this did to us. Those of us that had a natural infection and who were not vaccinated, those that had a natural infection that were vaccinated, we're not going to understand for multiple generations. And I think this isn't the first time we've seen this. I think there's been other manipulations of things. If you look at the research about Lyme, out of the East Coast, and you look at some of these other viruses that we were talking about earlier, these aren't the first pathogens that have been manipulated. Somehow the human organism is able to balance against these in some way. But it was certainly my experience with this particular virus that it was unlike other things I had seen.
Yes.
Not
I
only
agree.
my own personal experience with getting sick with it, where it felt very different than any other virus I had ever experienced, but also my clinical experience with so many patients. It acted in unusual ways, if it can act.
Yeah.
But my own sense of it, I don't know if we talked about this the last time. When I had it, there was an intelligence to it that I had not felt before. I got sick, my daughter got sick, and then I kind of had it for a day or two, and I went like, big deal. This is no big deal. I can get through this. This is, silly China virus. I'll be fine. And then I was laying in bed one night, and I had the distinct sense that the thing was hunting through my nervous system. I felt it looking through my spine. And I felt the moment when it found a weakness. It found a toxicity that I had. And it was at that moment, I tell you, I started to get really sick. And I was sick for 10 more days. And thank God for homeopathy. Homeopathy was the thing that pulled me out.
Amen to that. Same with me. I was hit hard. My family was hit hard. I repertorized my wife's case, and nitric acid presented very strong, and she had an immediate turnaround from it. Immediate. And for me, it was like taking multiple remedies to get myself slowly back. I didn't have an immediate response like that, but each one incrementally helped me a little bit. But it really, I haven't gotten sick like that in a long time. I had 106 fever. 106 fever. I'm not a 2-year-old baby anymore. It was 104 all day, and then it spiked to 106 for a while. That was really, really high. And it was just really bizarre. I felt like there was some, if I may say, even if it doesn't sound very scientific, I'm comfortable with that. And I'm comfortable trusting your empirical experience of feeling it moving through your nervous system, looking for a weakness. I'm grateful for your sharing. So I felt like there was something very dark about it, that it was like a kind of a Harry Potter Dementor, that it was not that it was necessarily sucking out all that was good, but it was really amping up the dark side, the doubts, my fears, bringing these things quite to the surface. Now that experience is not a bad experience. I think I came out of it stronger. Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But part of it, I could see somebody succumbing to that fear, and that would only enhance the action of the virus, of the whole experience. It would make it worse for them, and possibly leading to severe forms or even death. I could see that.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was this thing going around on the internet the last couple of days. You might have saw it, where they were quoting an old research study where they took 2 sheep and they had them in cages, and in one cage the sheep could see a wolf, and the other cage it couldn't, and this sheep died much earlier. Everything else being equal. So absolutely, the fear can get inside of us. There was a darkness to it. There was something about it, and like you said, that's not scientific, but that was my experience. That was your experience. It was plenty of other people's experience too. There was something unusual about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I do include, science comes from the Latin "scire," which means to know. And I think that we can know in various ways. And one of the ways that we don't credit ourselves with is our intuitive capacities. Like after you work for a while, you start to develop intuition. Even if you don't work, you're a student. You haven't even started studying, you have intuition, knowledge that is conveyed from our higher faculties. So knowledge in the self, from the higher self, from the divine, what have you, I consider a part of science. Again, we've gotten kind of myopic and pigeonholed science to be very limited and restrictive, especially for a lot of the things that we haven't yet proven with, laboratory means like repeatable research kind of data. Like subtle bodies that we have, auric field. What is the effect of fear? We could see that clinically, though. You could see it for sure that there is something to that. I'm a big mind-body medicine guy. In my program, holistic counseling, that I offer to mostly naturopathic doctors and students, I establish the root, like the most powerful body that we have is our mental body. So what we believe to be true imprints itself, trickles down into the other fields of emotional field, and then a vital field, and then physical body. So what the body holds as a toxin in some cases might be a reflection of the emotional baggage that the person is holding.
Sure.
If their vital force is working cleanly, they will rid themselves of that toxin. So what is accumulating is a reflection of something that is deeper for them than just the physical.
We see that in homeopathy, right? Too, that, people that hold on to metals and they can have these characteristics of those metals, or people that hold on to certain molds, and we know what the characteristics of those molds are. Absolutely.
Exactly. Like calcarea carbonica will often have, when you do a lab test, they'll be deficient in calcium or have an excess in calcium. They have some imbalance in calcium. So it is interesting. We do see that in homeopathy. And I love this kind of talk where we pull in our multiple hats that we wear as practitioners. It's a thrill. I always find that really, really fun. So let's go on to another part of your book that you have a whole chapter which is devoted to the vaccines, I'd like to hear you speak about that. Your most passionate points you'd like to make about that.
Well, I tried to be as objective. I tried to wait in the wings as long as I could. I tried to really, as I do with anything in medicine, I don't want to be jumping on a bandwagon too early. So I tried to really sit back and watch in my patient base and see the effectiveness of these therapeutics that we're given. And as it stands now, from my perspective, I think they were wholly unsuccessful.
Yes.
And I think we're standing on the precipice of perhaps the largest medical disaster of all times.
Yeah.
I have seen them do, I dare say, no good. I can't honestly think of a case where I feel as if they did any good. And at this point, we're really starting to see the harm trickle in. And it's stopping becoming a trickle. It's starting to be a flow. There is a lot of people who are having issues after receiving these. Lots and lots. And so I thought from the very beginning that it was a faulty premise to try and institute a campaign in the midst of an epidemic like that. We have no precedent for doing that before. Why would it work now with a new technology? I just thought it was a bad idea. There's no way you're going to chase something like that down. You're going to play whack-a-mole, which is exactly what we're doing now as we're trying to come out with new shots to deal with new variants. That I just thought it's impossible here. You're a dog chasing your tail, trying to come up with something that's going to squash this thing. And now everyone on, any side of the equation agrees with that. Like, the thing got out of the box. There's no putting it back, and there's no way you're going to get rid of it with something like this. Your only chance, as I stated all along, was this was a naturopathic disease. We should have been dealing with this from the very beginning by getting people healthy, getting their immune systems healthy, detoxifying them, and then providing simple, gentle, safe therapeutics to the people that were most susceptible to death and disability.
Absolutely. And it's interesting how naturopaths were quite silenced, not literally muzzled, not literally silenced, but intimidated to be silenced, afraid to lose their license, afraid to be excommunicated from the community to say anything of this nature. Those who did speak out against it are vindicated, have been proven correct. And here again, like I really appreciate your slow and steady, not jump to any conclusion, observe, wait until you have solid enough evidence. But many of us before knew it was a bad idea to come out with the vaccine, and we're cautioning against it right from the get-go. And you know, our world moves so quickly through news, through media, through everything, TV shows, everything changes and moves so quickly. But I remember some of the things that were said about the vaccine. It's 95% effective, or it's 90% effective. How absurd is that to say that? And what were they basing it on? One of the things they were saying is that, well, according to our research, you know, it highly reduces the severity of the SARS-CoV-2 infection. But even that, you can logically destroy that right in its tracks, because how do they know? Many people that were getting infected, let's say we go with that model, were having minor to minimal to no symptoms. So how do you compare a given person's effectiveness of the vaccine to reduce the severity? That's absurd. It's absurd, just that alone. And now we know in retrospect how dishonest that was. When are we going to really stop trusting this system that keeps, you know, fabricating unscientific and downright dishonest, you know, medical claims?
And there's still people that are saying, get it, you know, protect grandma, get it to this. And it's been proven it doesn't block transmission. People still get it. I see people every day who've had the vaccines who are getting sick with COVID. So the fact that people are still promoting those messages, it's downright false and it's hurtful, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I find that the whole thing has a very psychological, interesting element to it for sure. And I just hope that, as people continue to wake up, it'll be less and less, like they just won't listen to these authorities, but learn to trust their inner instincts and do their own research and consider all sides. You know, naturopaths should have been spearheading this and leading people, helping people, and some got penalized for saying, you know, vitamin C could be helpful. Vitamin C. There are people that are being brought into legal action in Ontario and Canada by CONO, the College of Naturopaths of Ontario, because they had the gall to suggest what a person might do to defend themselves against viral infection, against COVID.
College is bringing this?
Yes.
That's disturbing.
It's disturbing.
That's
very
disturbing. It's
disturbing.
one thing to have, you know, the Department of Justice or the Federal Trade Commission send letters to people like me. It's another thing to have your naturopathic colleges to stand up and, you know, and it's not like we don't have research. At the very beginning of this thing, I went on PubMed and I pulled up a stack of research this high for the use of vitamins and herbs for previous coronaviruses. It's not like the stuff doesn't exist.
No, right. It's there. If you just have to do the research. By the way, it was the College of Naturopaths of Ontario. It's the legal body, not the college itself.
Okay.
What the college did was, I love this one. They wanted to train and were putting efforts to train naturopathic doctors to reduce vaccine hesitancy in their patients and to administer the shot to facilitate a more communal defense, right? The college did that. The Naturopathic College of CCNM. That's horrid. I can only assume that that there's influence there that we're not aware of.
One would think, and it's my understanding, and I could be incorrect, but it's also my understanding that several of our West Coast naturopathic colleges here in the United States are requiring that students have received the experimental injection in order to continue their education or to entry into the school.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Like why nothing forced them to do that. There was no policy really in effect that mandated that. It shows that there is an influence there, which didn't just start with COVID. It started before with the departure from naturopathic principles, with fear mongering in medicine instead of teaching trust and confidence in our medicine. I could go on and on about that, but the precedent is already there. There's some kind of like shadow that has come over the profession.
We saw it when we were in school. We saw it when we exited the colleges. We've seen it now for over a decade, maybe two. It's
absolutely
pervasive.
absolutely.
It's got deep roots, and I know you and I both feel this way. It needs to be ferreted out, and we need a true vitalistic profession again.
We do. We absolutely do. Which makes me think of this endeavor that I'm working on right now, which I would like to give a shout out to everybody to consider participating in. I'm creating a survey for naturopathic doctors and current students. Recent graduates might be the most appropriate, but also certainly less recent, to fill out a survey of how they felt their naturopathic medicine college was. I have a lot of students I work with, and they have PTSD from their college. They were bullied, they were intimidated, they were ridiculed even by their naturopathic doctor supervisors in clinic and in you too, really?
Absolutely.
Well,
absolutely.
Well, how do you like them apples? I wasn't. I liked I struggled all 4 years with the lack of, I wanted more of the meat and potatoes of naturopathic philosophy and the true principles, but it was better than 20 years back, was better. 22 years back, actually, when I graduated. But I have so many students talking about them. They have no confidence to practice. They have no energy. They're burnt out. They have PTSD from the program. I want to gather a lot of information of students' experience to put a little external pressure on the colleges to improve.
I think that's a great idea. I'm so happy you're doing that.
Thank you.
We need to quantify it in a way too, right? Because it's just hundreds and hundreds of stories. And if you can actually put some objective data behind it and you could present it, I think that's a great idea.
I do too. And let's say one of the colleges, I won't mention any names, but I know in particular, some are much worse than others, score really low in this survey, like after many inputs of people filling it in. Then
you've already created this and people are filling it out already?
No, not yet. I'm creating it today. It'll be launched. I'll announce it through the website. It'll probably be through NDs for Truth platform. But then I'll circulate it through the different channels as well, email and on Facebook and stuff. And I'd love people to forward it to those that they'd like to, give an opportunity to voice their opinion. There's some students that are traumatized. They haven't told anybody.
Yeah.
Well, they could tell their story anonymously, not to risk any backlash whatsoever. They'll tell their story. I think that could be therapeutic for them.
Will be.
Yeah. So thank you. Yeah, I'll be getting that out. And I also did a little video. Have you been do you have PTSD from your naturopathic medicine college? I understand that there are enemies of naturopathic medicine. I understand that. I understand that they might take that as an opportunity to attack the profession. I think that risk is much less than the risk of us continuing to try to forward a false image of naturopathic medicine while it's really like crumbling and the students are traumatized and they're not coming out feeling prepared for practice and stuff like that.
Is it even naturopathic medicine anymore? I mean, really? I interact with a fair amount of students too. And honestly, a lot of them were really happy on our last discussion. They were happy. I get students that come to me that said, "Oh, I saw you talking with Dr. Black and that was great." And so that was another reason I wanted to do another one of these, because I think it helped a lot of students.
Great.
But when I hear students now who get out, it doesn't sound like naturopathic medicine. It really doesn't. So I'm concerned that it even is anymore.
I know. And so I agree. In any case, if it were in some weird way to lead to the demise of all the colleges, that wouldn't be a terrible thing. And I think that phoenixes would rise from the ashes.
They will.
You know, some might be, hey, we need to make this profession more rigorous and more evidence-based. And they can go and do like a hefty conventional type naturopathic medicine. They're welcome to do that. There's a place for that. But then there will be the rebuilding of the colleges in the image and likeness of what we would like to see our profession in.
I know that if you and I lived in the same place, we'd already be starting that college. So, because you and I feel it so deeply that it needs to happen. And I feel the exact same way. There will be true vitalistic schools that arise that teach all of the lost arts, and it's going to be beautiful. And
I agree.
And I have a feeling you and I are going to be sitting across a big wood desk from each other at some point, pushing curriculums back and forth, talking about things. So
that would be cool. I love that vision. I don't know if you remember or if you knew at all that I started this school. I was in the planning phase for something that I called Totum, TOTUM, which is Latin for the whole, you know, like treat the whole. And it was getting underway. And then I realized there was a few factors that led me to realize I couldn't do it right now. It was just the times and the stress of things that were happening. It was the supply chain problem. And it was also my own move. So I just couldn't do it. But it is in the ether, right? It you know, in Kabbalah, these things start up with the thought of something, with just a concept. And then you develop the thought. So we developed it, but it hasn't manifested into the world yet. And people like yourself are invited to do so, and maybe we have to collaborate on that. I can still sense that that's not the time for me. And any school that I do start, I do want it to have some of the ancient roots of what I consider naturopathic medicine, like for instance, the teachings of Paracelsus, which are not just herbal medicine, but his hermetic knowledge, like alchemical knowledge. I'm a big fan. And I think a naturopathic medicine could have it. I mean, we have the roots of it in history is there, and we could have a way of teaching that. I would love that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you'd have all these different branches with anthroposophical medicine and homeopathy, and of course the herbal tradition and hydrotherapy. And yes, the Hermetic teachings. I think it would be the most wonderful, beautiful thing, and people would flock to it. And it will happen.
I agree. Thank you for that. That's so beautiful to collaborate with you, even if just like verbally, you know, just mentally, conceptually right now. I appreciate that so much. Which does bring me, like, is there anything else you'd like to share about your book or about this topic? Because we could move on to another of the topics that we promised. You know, we don't have to get to all the things that we said we're going to talk about. We don't have to at all, but just, is there anything else you'd like to share on this topic or about your book?
No, I think it actually dovetails into the other reason we wanted to talk was you know, you moved and got a farm, and then I've moved also and bought a piece of land and am going to start to grow some food, going to start to grow some plants, going to start to grow some herbs. And it piqued my interest because you and I were writing back and forth emails talking about what we were doing and sort of catching up. And you had mentioned that you were working with your plants doing electroculture. And I went, oh man, this is something I've just started to dip my toe in and started to read about and watch videos. So I'm actually really curious about your experience with that and schooling me up, helping me to understand this ancient practice of using electricity to help plants grow.
Oh, thank you. What a great preamble to electroculture. I'm so passionate about it, and it's relatively, I'm like in my infancy with experience and knowledge. I absorbed as much as I could. I bought some of those, you know, I think one of them was from like the 18th century, written in this old scribe, like handwritten from France with this old French that I could barely understand. I got a whole bunch of books. I just tried to consume as much as I could till I got a sense of things. So electroculture is actually a broad word. It encompasses many different practices that one can use to enhance growth. So, for example, the use of magnets is a form of electroculture. When we look at, there's an amazing, like, you know, alchemy and electroculture, my studies in alchemy and electroculture, they enhance each other. They
Sure.
one, right?
Another, yes.
So what we understand causes the growth and the regeneration of life, like in the spring and the fall, is also interesting to understand with electroculture. So one of the pieces of knowledge, like farmers have known for a long time that, for instance, saltpeter, potassium nitrate, helps the growth of crops. All forms of nitrate, to be honest, like even calcium nitrate can really help the growth of crops. So in the north, they noticed that if they had pieces of limestone that were not exposed to the south, that were protected from the south, that soil, the limestone or marl, you know, mixture of limestone and clay, it would be rich in nutritive life force, which now we know is like a kind of a nitrate, potassium nitrate, which they called saltpeter. And coming from the north, what's coming from the north? Well, it's the magnetic field of the earth. It's electromagnetic field of the earth. We know that there's this potential difference between the sky and the earth. The earth is our rooted negative, you know, that's where the electrons come from. So we think, and the potential to move that comes from how high you go in the sky. So one of the things that I've implemented, I'd say number one thing is an antenna. And you know, the French are more advanced than us than this in France. I find Europe is often a couple of steps ahead in homeopathy and lots of things, you know. In any case, I could bring up a couple of pictures here. I'll show you my device. Like,
oh, cool.
Let me see if I can do that. Okay, this should work. So I'm going to share a screen, and then I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to go like this. So this is my you know, back here. Can you see this? Can you see this picture?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So this is a steel sphere. This is my own invention called the Mojo Cell. Here I have magnets that are actually at the right angle pointing to the North Pole, the magnetic north. They absorb that. So what you want to have is you want to have the North Pole of the magnet pointing north in anything that you do, because the North Pole is actually what absorbs, it pulls in, and the South Pole pushes out and tonifies. So if you were to take, let's say you wanted to put on an acupuncture point and you want to sedate that point, you're going to put the North Pole of a magnet, because that diminishes energies, it pulls away from. Whereas the South Pole of a magnet, an actual magnet, pushes and tonifies. So you're drawing that in and it goes down. This is just the top of it. The way it actually looks in the sky. Hang on, where is that? Okay, so here you see my garden, 20 feet by 20 feet by 30 feet. And
it's quite an antenna.
Yeah, it's like 24 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
And what that does is the higher you go, the greater the potential differences between the sky and the earth. So what that does is it actually pulls. Now, whether it's pulling from the earth or it's pulling down from the sky, I can't tell you. But electrical theory is that it flows from the negative source of electrons to the positive. So
An electron gradient at a minimum, right?
okay, there's an electron gradient. Thank you. So what I've done is, if you see my beds here, I don't know if I have a better picture. These are my zucchini. This is a zucchini plant. It was like 5 feet tall. It was like gargantuan.
Well, that's what amazes me is you said my production has just been outrageous. Like it's beyond your wildest dreams, the amount of vegetables and the size you've been able to grow.
Yeah, look at this. This is in the back. This wasn't even fully mature. This was a cabbage. The cabbage was 3 pounds.
Wow.
The zucchinis, I had zucchinis that were gigantic, and that's not unheard of for zucchinis. They can get pretty big. The pumpkin plants were prehistorically large. They were just nuts. This is me with collard greens.
But you're not a farmer. You don't have previous experience farming, do you?
No, I don't. I think that the electroculture really, really helped. This is just like some of our bountiful harvest.
Yeah.
And where else? Do I have anything else here? So I wanted to show you these. I have 6 beds.
Yep.
In each bed, I buried a galvanized steel wire. It's kind of like a thin gauge, maybe like 18 gauge or something, like what you would have on an electric fence around a farm, right? And all those wires are connected to this antenna. So they're all earth grounded. And what that does,
is kind of coiled around the bottom of it or something.
Yeah, that's right. I coil it around the bottom and I bury it. I didn't dig the earth because I did a no-till. And I'm a big fan of no-till because it's like you cut your skin open and then you want your hair to grow there. It's not going to grow for a while. You have to first heal the land after you till it. And then, all the bacteria gets disturbed. So we did a no-till. We just laid our boxes down. First, I just took a shovel and I cut just like that, just down the line, and I shoved this wire into along the middle of the beds. You have a 4 foot effect, so 2 feet on each side around any wire that's connected to an antenna. So the idea here is that there's a flow of electrons. Now, I was saying that a magnet, I could probably come off unless I think that's good enough for now. So magnets, it's been shown you could do your own searching on different research, like hoity-toity research, and then just grassroots people doing their own experiment with the South Pole facing up to the roots of their plants. So you put a magnet where the South Pole is facing up, and you put your plant on that, and you put your soil all around. And then you could put another North Pole facing up with the South Pole facing down at the plant on the surface, or like a couple of inches. And this also greatly promotes growth. So that's an example of electroculture.
I've seen other ones where people just run sort of copper wires over the plants and maybe at the side of the beds, and they don't have an antenna like yours, but just it appears like the proximity of the copper wires just over the plants in some way too. Really, what it struck me as really simple electroculture. I mean, have you seen some of that too?
Yes, well, definitely. If you take and you create a certain kind of a coil, I think it's called the Rodinsky coil. There's different kinds of coils that can be created. That might not be the right word. Anyway, you'll have to look up yourself. Different kinds of coils with copper. Also, if you want to get really nerdy, you can cut your copper to a certain length to establish a frequency. And if the frequency is in harmony with the plant, it will enhance growth. So one of the things that I did with my antennas, I cut all different lengths and I used different metals. And the different metals, when you press different metals like zinc and copper and iron, when you press them together, they create a flow of electrons.
Well, you are an alchemist.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So you want to enhance the flow of electrons in any way. So there are these, now you want to have your beds facing north and south. That's very important. And because even if you didn't attach it to an antenna, if you bury this wire north-south, it becomes an antenna itself in the earth to pick up the galvanic currents, which are flowing from the north to the south. or the south to the north, whichever, because I know that there is stuff coming from the south. Because if you have a tree that's right south of where you have your garden, you won't get as strong an electroculture effect because the tree is going to be absorbing all that radiation, the positive radiation. One other trick that you want to do is you want to plant at the very southernmost point of your bed along the line. So you get a ring magnet that has a hole in the middle, and you put it on your wire to the southernmost point. And the North Pole is pointing north. So it's going, feed me from the north. It's absorbing that. And this causes a flow of ions or electrons, what have you, or galvanic current. Maybe it's even a form of orgone, prana, whatever, what have you. It causes this flow along the wire, which attracts the water and nutrients. So the water and the nutrients are drawn upward to the roots of the plants.
I mean, even if that's it, even if that's all it's doing,
yeah,
it's doing a lot for the plants there. I suspect there's a lot more to it, but just that alone.
It is said to establish balance in pH, to promote healthy fungi and bacteria in the soil. It is said to resist drought because of this phenomenon of water following the flow of current. And after the first year, this is our first year, there's an not exponential growth, but there's a steady increase in effectiveness in productivity for 5 to 6 years, an increase. Every year we're going to get more until year 5, 6 when it plateaus, but you still maintain this high level. After the first year, you no longer need to fertilize your soil. That's the word on the street. Wow. I believe it. Yeah. I believe it, having seen this, because it's almost like the materialist farmer is like, let's fertilize. And the vitalist farmer is let's move chi, let's move currents going around here. Yeah.
I almost wondered too. I had this thought as I was leading up to this, thinking, God, what if you used like deuterium depleted water or structured water or have you already thought about this?
I have it set up, not deuterium depleted, but I have structured water that I have implemented. I have a machine called the swirler. So it just swirls water in a vortex and then it goes through a magnetic field. And I could pump that into my plants. And I did a couple of times.
Yeah.
I did a whole bunch of things, honestly. So did I really isolate what's doing what? No. But in the broad scheme, the electroculture in general greatly enhanced. And I can tell you, I had sweet potatoes growing outside the garden. And just today, we harvested sweet potato in the garden. I got a lot of little ones outside the garden about this big, and a couple were that big. The ones that were in the garden were as big as a head. They were huge.
And it's the same soil. You use the same fertilizer the first year, all else being equal. Just the things you did inside the garden are different than what was out. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's very edifying, because I'm also looking at it. I'm looking at it with two sides of my brain. One side of my brain is going, yes, grow. This is amazing. This is going to work. Having a great imagination and having faith in it. Talking to the plants, these things.
Playing music,
loving on them, talking to them. This really works with plant growth.
Yes.
And a lot of farmers know that, they know it. And the books I read about electroculture, they said, talk to your plants also. It's important. So I was like, cool.
Did you read that book, The Secret Life of Plants? Did you ever read that one?
No, I don't.
Oh, you gotta read it. It came out in like the 70s. It's a fun read. It speaks to many of the things we've been talking about tonight already.
I think I ordered it though. It rang such a bell. Yeah.
It's such a great book.
Well, thank you. I'll check that out. So on the other side of my brain is going, is this really working? Like, does it work? I don't want to be because human beings, we have an infinite capacity to delude ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
I want to be discerning. I want to know if this is working. So I asked we're part of this program here in our state where it's like funded by these donors that want to just help people grow, like people that are having homesteads. This is really important. It's a very interesting part of our evolution in our culture right now, especially since what's going on, right? So this woman is coming out to it to just to have a look at our garden. And I was like, so what do you think? Is this like unusual growth? Is this like, because she sees dozens and dozens of other families like us that are starters and farmers. She said, yeah, I think you guys got something going on here. And our friends came by and said, this is insane. Like, we want to do this now. This is huge.
Yeah. I got to ask, how did you make the rod? How did you make the giant antenna?
Okay, well, thanks for that question.
I know other people want to know that too.
Yeah, all right, let me show you this. I'll come back over here. So basically what I did was, like, I showed you the top of it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Which
the top
which was sitting on the deck as you're manufacturing it, I assume.
Yeah, this is like the top 4 or 5 feet of it.
Yeah. And are those like metal? Are those metal probes coming off the top too that look?
Yeah, this is a other magnets here on that point south. So when I put it up, I made sure to align it north and south. And I was a stickler about that. It took me a good dozen tries till I got it really aligned. I'm like, that's good. That's aligned now, because it was off a bit, I wasn't happy about it being off. So this is the top part. The other part, I can tell you, this is actually was a well galvanized steel pipe that had to come out because it was corroded and was rusty and stuff. But everywhere that I use, I've polished it and I made sure that the steel to copper or steel to whatever contact was tight. And then I just basically, I put it up over here and then I just pushed it up and then I put it up and I put a screw under and then I put it up and I put a screw on because it was going like, it was really, oh my gosh, it's going to fall, So it was crazy because it was very top heavy. But now here's a trick that I learned. This doesn't have to be metal, this whole thing. All you need is metal at the top as the antenna part, and then you could run a wire. You could run a wire down a pole, a fishing pole. You could run a wire down a super long 4x4.
Yep, sure.
Whatever you want, whatever you can do
some
there.
kind of conduit. Yeah.
Yeah, you just need a conduit. It's going to pull that energy.
Now, so you guys get lightning there?
Yeah, we get plenty of lightning. So far, so good. So far, so good. Somebody told me, and I don't know if I entirely believe this, but just because you're earth grounded doesn't mean that that's why lightning is going to strike there. Trees are all earth grounded. They're all these conduits of this positive potential with this earth rootedness. They're all that's what causes the flow of sap. That's what I believe is this flow of current through the tree, because it has this electroculture principle in itself. And some trees are very tall and they don't get hit and others get hit. So we don't really know why. In the heart of a very big storm, I'm not going to go anywhere near the garden, just for safety purposes.
I can't tell from the picture. Is actually the pole planted in the middle of the garden, or do you have it on top of the house, or
I have it
right out of the garden?
Am I still sharing here?
I just couldn't see from the picture because it was a little dark.
Oh my gosh, I thought I was sharing. Here, I'm showing you the picture and I'm not even sharing the screen. Let me come back here and share. So what I've done, so I have my fence here, right? These are 4x4s. They're about 2 feet into the ground. Yeah. So they're only about 6 feet above the ground. So it's connected on the inside of this.
Okay. It's connected to the corner 4x4.
Yeah, that's right. And it comes down to about, let's say here, this level. And I had pre-drilled holes into it.
Oh, cool.
So that I just screwed right into the 4x4, which are cemented. These are concreted in.
Yep.
And then I have a wire that runs like this. I had this old extension cord that didn't work anymore, and it had three, it has your neutral and your hot and your ground. So I was able to go to three different, with one wire, I was able to go to three different beds, and then another part of the wire to three different beds like
What a
that.
great idea. I am so doing this in my garden.
Awesome. Well, if you want any consult, just let me know if you have any questions.
I
This,
will.
honestly, I've basically just exhausted most of my knowledge on electroculture. It's that simple. It's that simple. You might have seen, I do have also like pyramids on the site. Pyramids are a form of electroculture.
Sure.
You want them, in a metallic frame. It could be plastic, but honestly, metal is a better antenna. And you want that facing north and south as well. So the sides are running north and south. And then there's obviously perpendicular ones now, but they're perfectly perpendicular.
There's obviously ways people have figured out to hack growing food in environments where we would think it was less conducive to growing food using techniques like this. There has to be something to it. And your first year bounty speaks to that. And time will tell, right? You'll know over many years, you'll go, hey, it was this or it was that, or it was this or it was that. And you'll know, because that's clinical experience. That's taking something, throwing it against the wall, seeing if it sticks, doing it several times. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't work, you abandon it and you move on.
Exactly. And you know what? I struggled with gardening. I tried many gardens. My wife and I, we tried it many times, and we got measly growth. Now, granted, we were in the north, we were in Canada, in Montreal, and in the Laurentians, which is a much shorter growing season. So we're seeing abundance like we've never seen before, but it does exceed expectations, even where we are now, in Tennessee. So, we've grown close to 900 pounds of food now since we planted in May. 900 pounds of food. A lot of that has been canned, or we ate it or we gave it away, but it's all going to use. And this, I like to think, if you look at what's happening on the planet, shortages, food shortages, supply chain shortages, ridiculous prices of fertilizer, shortages of fertilizer. We have to find ways to be self-sufficient. That leads us to be empowered. And when you're empowered, you have confidence, and it promotes health. If you're dependent on any system that's defunct, you're in trouble in some way,
I believe firmly that we all have to do this moving forward, that this is our task at this point, is to disconnect ourselves from the matrix as much as possible, get self-sufficient in our food, our energy, our water, our medicine, our banking, our systems, because we don't know which one's going to fall apart next.
Right.
And we're watching what I perceive as the end of civilization as we know it. We're right here, and it's happening. And I agree completely. Just as we're talking about the return of a vitalistic naturopathic school, we have to go back to vitalistic gardening practices.
Exactly.
We have to go back to different ways of harboring energy and storing energy and creating energy. We have to do all of these things. And these old techniques are going to percolate back up, and we're going to find the ones that people have used time immemorium to stay alive on the planet when everything's falling apart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's such a joy to share with like-minded people that are aware of this, and to be empowered. The bottom line is empowerment. The bottom line is knowing ourselves and knowing our true nature, and being empowered to think for ourselves, to act for ourselves, to grow for ourselves, to I want to say medicate ourselves. It sounds a little funny, but really to know how to heal ourselves, or to have access to that if we're not trained, say. But even the principles that I teach in mind-body medicine, a layperson can grasp quite easily. And again, there's this inner divine nature that resonates with that, and that can learn from that, and be able to apply simple principles of asking questions to oneself, like, why did that upset me? Why did I get so angry when that person said that to me? I got really offended there. What's going on inside of me? Self-responsibility, very important for our times.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
What are our best cases? Our best cases are where we had someone, they were going through some things. We put them on the right path. We gave them a remedy, or we taught them how to eat, or we empowered them with some questions. And then they became more empowered themselves, right? They didn't have to keep coming back and seeing us once a month for us to find the remedy or the cure, but instead they became healthier, and they just drop in periodically for a tune up or a new dose of something or a new perspective or a new advice. But really, they become healthier people. And we have these people in our practices that you feel like it's like getting a bird to fly, you
yeah,
know? You
yeah,
just kind of get them out of the nest and there they go. And now they're flourishing. It's the
yeah.
most wonderful thing to see. And you're right, as a race, we've given away our power over and over and over again. And it's time for us all to take it back.
Amen to that. Amen to that. You know, when in my first 5 minutes as a naturopathic student, first 5 minutes, Anthony Godfrey was teaching the philosophy, history and philosophy of naturopathic medicine. He was one of our greats, one of our elders. He's passed on to the next life now. God bless him. He quoted an anonymous quote, and it was the goal of the naturopathic doctors to become obsolete,
Mm,
to just get people so healthy
yep.
that they leave. And you know it's bittersweet, but you're happy to see them go. It's like letting a bird fly, like you said. That's it. So I pray for that. I pray that we can help people, empower people, rather than keep on feeding them fear, such that they believe themselves to be dependent on the doctor. You know.
That's allopathy at its core. That's the basic tenet in it is you need me. You go to the doctor when you're sick. I have the answers. I'm the only one that has the answers. In fact, the answers are patented, and therefore you can't even have access to them, that I am the gatekeeper to those things.
Right.
And that's the antithesis of our belief system around medicine and patients and doctoring.
Yeah. Exactly. And I would say it's the antithesis of what can be and what is in nature naturally, without this opposition and without this control. This is what would emanate naturally, I think, from humanity if factions of control weren't trickling down from the tops of the organizations, because then we emulate that, you know, like the systems emulate that.
Well, that's what those systems of control try and do. They try and trick people into believing those things because that's how you maintain control, right? You can't grow your own food. You can't create your own energy. You can't be your own doctor. How are you possibly going to have a civilization where you don't have dollar bills that actually now are just on your phone? You can't do any of those things. It's too hard.
Right.
When the
Right.
reality, we can do all those things. Look, you put a pole up in your backyard and you grew 900 pounds of food.
And what a joy it was too. I do look forward to next year when we're going to see, because next, you know, with every renewal, the farmer and the alchemist and the naturopath and the homeopath is renewed and brought forward to a greater degree.
Yes. Yes.
With every challenge of the winter, the
Yes.
death in the winter and the rebirth, we grow to a deeper degree. And I'm looking forward to what that might look like in our little patch.
It's so cool. It's that thing we spoke to where you get ill and you come out of it and you're better. And I feel that very much in my being, having come out of, let's say, the COVID thing, whatever it was, that thing of 2.5 years, that I was rebirthed out of that as a finer physician and person and husband and father, having been through the trials and gone through all of that. So I
Yeah,
hear you, man. I hear you.
that's awesome.
Regeneration
Well,
and growth.
that's great. I just feel full of joy chatting with you, and really glad that you were number one here in season 2. I'm so pleased about the things that we got to speak about, in keeping with the tradition of Endies for Truth. I'd like to offer you the chance to express any last words of wisdom, something that you have on your chest, anything you want to share, really, about anything that we talked about or that we didn't talk about even.
You know, the thing that floats to mind is I had a patient yesterday, a really lovely man. I saw him 6 weeks ago for the first time. He went to the dentist and he had to have a procedure done. And he let the dentist know that he was very sensitive to anesthetics. And yet the dentist gave him a very large bolus of Novocaine, threw him into AFib.
Oh,
The
geez.
guy's been in AFib for a year. He's a veteran, so he's going to the VA, and the VA literally are mailing him bags of prescriptions. He told me this. He said there was a bag of prescriptions that they wanted me to take it. I don't want to take it, man. So he comes to me 6 weeks ago, and I take his case and I give him a remedy. I just give him a remedy, a couple drops of a remedy. That night, his heart is like a basketball. It's going crazy. It's leaping out of his chest. He stops by my clinic the next day. I happen to be here. I see him in the waiting room. I said, just wait, man. Just wait. I don't see him for 6 weeks. He shows up yesterday. He says, that's it. I've had no AFib. I've had nothing. It's gone. In fact, my gut's better. This feels better. That's better. This is better. You know, so just for us to remember that the simplest of interventions, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be this supplement and this thing and that thing and these complex treatment plans, which we need those sometimes too, but sometimes just a single drop of something completely changes everything. So I always want naturopathic students and other naturopaths. It's so good for us to share those things because they just remind us that it can be so simple.
Absolutely. I so appreciate that story. It lifts my spirit and it bolsters my confidence. And I can only imagine for students listening to doctors like yourself with these kinds of really glorious results with cases. It's very edifying. It promotes confidence. And that's how a student should exit the college. They should come out rearing to go, like even maybe erring on the side of too bold.
Yes.
You know, I'm ready.
Yes.
I want to take on the world. Come on, like give me the cases, right?
Yes.
And I just want to announce to anyone who managed to get to the end of this hour and a half of fun discussion that next week at the same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, I'm going to be interviewing students and recent graduates, and they're giving them a chance to tell their stories about the colleges. So I invite anybody interested in being involved in that to please join and tell your story. Let's talk about it, because we don't want to just talk about, that's what the survey is for. It's to have some end plan here, but talking about it is also important. So that'll be next week. Thanks, Doc. Really appreciate you. Deeply appreciate the talk. And thanks for being on NDs for Truth tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this. Season 2, season 3, season 4. Keep it going, man. This is important.
Awesome. Cool. Awesome. You bet. So Dr. Moshe signing out. God bless everyone. Peace and love. And we will see you on